big story. JD Vance is in India. We are tracking all the developments closely, and in fact, if my camera person can show you, the meeting has just started. We can see the convoy of US Vice President JD Vance has just arrived for that all-important meeting with Prime Minister Modi. The next 45 minutes will be extremely important because it will pave the way for what could be the next steps, roadmap, vision as far as the India-US relationship is concerned. Before we get in our guest, let me quickly now put those big questions that we ask us always on India Global. First up, will JD Vance address India's concerns related to immigration? They have been amplified the last couple of weeks due to measures that the Trump administration has been taking against students and H-1Bs. Will that be addressed? Can that be addressed? That's the first question. Second up, will intel sharing now also be a key factor post the Havur Rana's extradition? Remember, a very successful extradition that took place after Prime Minister Modi and President Trump met. Will a follow-up mean closer intel sharing? Will terrorism be a key focus in these talks? Next up, will the 90-day tariff pause nearing an end, what's really at stake going forward? Can India balance the US market access demands with its own Make in India priorities? Remember, both sides are talking about America first, India first, Make in India. Where is that balance? Where is that fine line? What will be that give and take? Maybe this meeting will provide some answers. And lastly, can breakthroughs be expected when it comes to defense tech transfers, and how will this shape long-term regional security dynamics? A lot of ground to cover, as I said. Let me first get in Ambassador Arun Singh, who's been the ambassador of India to the US. Ambassador Singh, I'm going to keep coming back to you, but I want to keep reflecting the visuals that are happening behind me, because the convoy of US Vice President JD Vance is right behind me, and all those black vehicles are nothing but the security, the US Secret Service security that is there ahead of the meeting that is in fact started, followed by the dinner that will take place. All right, Ambassador Singh, let me start with you, sir. First question I want to ask you is that this is an important meeting, a lot of ground to cover, a lot at stake. How do you view this meeting, and what would be your ideal takeaways from this?
I think what this meeting signals is that high-level engagement between India and the US is continuing. You would recall that the Indian Prime Minister was the fourth foreign leader invited by US President to visit the US. So that was one signal. The Indian Foreign Minister was among the invitees at the inauguration. And the first set of meetings that the new Secretary of State did was with the Quad foreign ministers, with the Indian foreign minister. So it's part of that a visit of the Vice President will allow high-level discussions to take place. Now, as you have indicated, there is going to be a certain amount of focus clearly in the entire India-US establishment on trade-related issues, because that's one of the difficulties, that's one of the areas where US has been putting some emphasis. But it's clear that both sides have been very seriously and with determination engaged in negotiations on this. The Indian Commerce Minister has visited US, the Assistant USTR has come to India, a senior Indian official is scheduled to visit the US later this week, and the negotiators have finalized the terms of reference between them. So this discussion is continuing. Now, while that is happening, clearly I think at the level of the Vice President and the Prime Minister, they will look at the broader relationship. What are the challenges the two countries are facing, where there is convergence in handling them? Some of those would relate to China's unilateral and assertive action. Also, how do you strengthen the military cooperation between the two countries? Because if you recall in the joint statement... I was coming to just that, sir, which is that there are two aspects which many believe may find more than just a mention in this meeting. One could be the shared concerns regarding the geopolitical dynamics that US operates in, and also that India operates in when it comes to the Indo-Pacific. And also the fact that what about defense ties between India and US, and will that also translate into greater military purchases, something that US has been asking about for some time? So in terms of the geopolitical dimension, the US has been signaling that despite all the ferment taking place globally, despite their changing the stance related to the European security architecture, working on trying to bring about some kind of a peaceful resolution of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. They're looking at issues in the West Asia somewhat differently from how the Biden administration had done. But at the same time, they're signaling that they're focused on the Indo-Pacific. That remains, and they continue to see China as a challenge from there. So from that aspect, there is a certain amount of convergence in handling the challenge that is there. So that's one. As far as the military aspect is concerned, purchases are one aspect, but there is also the aspect related to co-development of technology and transfer of technology to India. So there again, there is some focus in the joint statement, for example. Both of them recognize that the earlier established mechanism of INDESEX, India-US Defense Acceleration Ecosystem, where the startups in defense technologies from both countries were brought together to try and work for co-development of technology, that has worked well, and they want to take that further. The US has authorized 80% technology transfer for G414. So those are the areas that would also be looked at, not just defense supplies.
Absolutely. Ambassador Singh, the other side I want to ask you is that if you were to look at it from Vice President Vance's side, this is his third international tour. Important because, he would want the right set of optics, which have been so far, unlike his other two visits, whether one talks about the Greenland one or the one in Europe. What do you think would be the takeaways or outcomes that the Vice President would be looking out for from this high-profile, important meeting?
So I think from the optics point of view, I think the visit to India will certainly be different from his earlier visits to Europe, where there had been some controversy. The visit to Greenland, where from all reports, none of the locals or the local leaders engaged with him during that visit, because they have a certain negative approach to how US has been articulating issues related to Greenland. But here, I think at the level of the leadership of the two governments, there is a certain comfortable way of dealing with each other. Despite differences on tariff, President Trump has spoken very warmly of our Prime Minister, his friendship with him. So that dimension is there. Vice President Vance had a meeting with the Prime Minister in Paris in February. So I think at the official level, there will be a signal that the leaders relate to each other well. They're discussing issues that matter. And then again, I think the visit to Jaipur, the visit to Agra, earlier today, the visit to Akshardham will signal that between India and the US, the people-to-people dimension of the relationship is very, very strong. And again, that is reflected in also the Vice President's own family.
Do you think, sir, that will be pressed upon further, given the concerns of the Indian-American community, given the concerns about the students, H-1B holders, the techies? Do you think the soft power and also the people-to-people ties would be an area that the Vice President would also like to focus more on to assuage frayed nerves and concerns of India?
So I think that's an issue where there are different dimensions. So at one level, the immigration from India has certainly contributed to deepening of the India-US partnership. It has contributed to US strength in many areas. Many of the CEOs of major US companies are people of Indian origin who studied in India and moved over to the US. So they made tremendous contributions to technology development in the US, doctors, engineers, and in many other sectors. So that's recognized. But at the same time, today, there is a certain political mood in the US related to immigration that has been built up. And so there are consequences. And we are seeing that a certain number of Indians were deported from the US. There's many students, their visa status has been revoked. So here at one level, any country has a sovereign right to decide on visas. But one would expect that people who've been given visas with a certain understanding, those purposes are fulfilled. If students have gone there, they should be able to complete their education. So I think these are the issues that the two governments would need perhaps to discuss in greater detail.
And finally, sir, before we wrap this up, how important or how significant do you think China could be in these talks? There's a position that US has taken, but the position as far as New Delhi is concerned, it's not only nuanced, but is also evolving as we speak. How much do you think China will figure in these talks?
So, China will certainly figure, but I don't think we should see the India-US relationship as predicated only around China. That's only one dimension, because there are a lot of strengths in the bilateral relationship. If you look at trade, US is our largest trading partner. India is among the top 10 trading partners of the US. US is the largest foreign investor in India. India companies have invested more than $40 billion in the US. At 5.2 million, US is the largest single country presence of Indian origin diaspora. And then you now have 1,800 global capability centers in India.
Absolutely.
Doing cutting edge R&D and technology development work for the global operations of major corporations. So there are certain inherent strengths in the US-India relationship, and we should keep that in mind.